I'm joined now by Senator Cory Booker. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So your speech on the Senate floor, 25 hours, nonstop without taking any breaks, obviously broke through in a huge way. And so how is the rest of the Senate Democratic caucus thinking about this in terms of, okay, it's not just what can we do that is the bare minimum, but what can we do that is the maximum? I mean, if you set the bar, how is the rest of the caucus thinking about this in terms of what everybody should be doing?
Look, I think that the thing I tried to confess in my speech is that all of us were struggling because we were hearing the really powerful demands, the legitimate demands of our constituents saying, the crisis is so great, you need to do more. And none of us were doing enough. And I don't think that just goes for 47 senators in the Democratic caucus, but given the level of crisis, all of us should be asking that same question. And so what's great right now is I'm starting to see more creativity in all of us as a caucus to say, how do we rise and meet this? And even just throwing ideas out there about how to bring attention to, how to dramatize the level of the crisis. So look, one of the best things that's happened is learning the tools that you've mastered. I had people that didn't have a TikTok account, that now have a TikTok account. And in their first days, there's such a hunger for voices, seeing Mark Kelly get millions of views in his first days, and how he is doing what I think is most important right now is to inform, engage, and activate the best power we have, which is the power of the people.
Now, in terms of standing up there, and I know that there's been a lot of ink spilled about this, and certainly you spent a lot of time speaking about it. But what was that moment like for you to get to the 25th hour and to know that that you had taken over the record from somebody who himself made history by virtue of trying to prevent somebody like you from even being able to stand where you were standing?
I think what I try to draw a lot right now is from the strength of history. And here is a guy that was in power. He did have the votes. He did have the ability to block the whole civil rights movement. And yet here I stand as a black guy in the Senate. It's a testimony, along with people like Lisa Blunt Rochester and Angela Alsobrooks and Warnock. We all stand as a testimony that they failed, even though they were powerful, demagogic leaders preying upon hate and division to stop justice from happening. And in many ways, I hope, for me, I took a lot of strength from that can't stand. These people don't win. They are in the ash heap of history as those people that were on the wrong side of history. And so for me at that moment, I cannot tell you how much I felt my ancestors present in that time. I was exhausted, dehydrated, dealing with muscle cramps and a lot of other challenges, but suddenly I just felt like I was riding on the spirit of people who came before. And a line that I have to say to my team, Marissa, one of my members, said to me, like, should we get there, because we didn't know this, she just said, don't forget, Senator, that you're not there because of his speech. You weren't standing here to break his speech. You're here despite his speech. Yeah. And I think that was so much truth to remember that. And I think this is the most important point is we didn't win the civil rights legislation because of anything that happened in that chamber, or because of any of the senators. If anything, they did not have the power to overcome that filibuster and to overcome that resistance. What changed that was the outside, was how many Americans were willing to march and sit in and do freedom rides and leave the comfort of their homes to go out and be a part of a larger movement that had black folks and white folks, Jewish folks and Muslim folks, people, unusual coalitions that came together to overcome that moment in history. And that is the story of America over and over and over again, from abolition to suffrage to civil rights to LGBTQ rights, from Selma to Stonewall to Seneca Falls. That's the story of America that we need now more than ever to be living.
And I think it was the beginning of what we're seeing in terms of a sea change for people not only recognizing that it's important to break through and we have to think of creative ways to break through, B, recognizing that in some of these instances you got to put your body on the line, and that's exactly what you did. And I think that people don't appreciate it until sit down for 6 hours and try not to go to the bathroom. Right. Sit down for 8 hours and try not to eat anything. But that was followed then by this groundswell of energy and engagement over the weekend, where we then saw millions of Americans take to the streets. And I think that this is the beginning of what we're seeing. It feels a little bit different from where we were before, which is for months everyone kind of licking their wounds and obviously a lot of introspection among the Democratic Party. So do you feel like it's a little bit different now in this moment as we've kind of gotten over the shock of the second Trump administration and had to change our perspective in terms of, okay, what do we do now? How do we actually fight back? How do we win?
So there is something about the physicality of this. When I was out in New Jersey on a chilly day, rainy day, seeing people shaking and cold, but still so noble and determined. When I went to a town hall and I saw a young man with autism who had a lot of anxiety about being in front of crowds, who insisted on coming out and in front of 1,000 people with his voice determined, resolute, but clearly halting from the fear of crowds, still speaking up. We posted today the story of a little girl during the disabilities rights movement trying to dramatize what is an everyday reality for her, but not a challenge for all of us, by crawling up steps because of the lack of accessibility in so many public buildings. It was moments like that throughout our history that have changed opinions. And I know I'm still hearing about Joseph in my town hall and the power of his voice. So again, the question has to keep coming back to each and every one of us in this time where tens of millions of Americans have their health care on the line, where tons of our seniors have their health care or their retirement security or their nursing homes on the line, when pregnant mothers who 40+% rely on Medicaid, when all of this is on the line, and I can keep going, what did you do in this moral moment? And how much are you willing to leave your comfort zone and put yourself out there? This is what the power of this moment is. And every person that does it sends out ripples, not just of hope and light, but also ripples that carry other people to do more and more and more.
Right, and I think to your exact point, as I said before, this is now the bar. And so what are the rest of your colleagues, for example, going to be doing? Are they going to hold town halls? Are they going to hold town halls in red districts? Are they going to go out somewhere and stand and get arrested if they need to? And so I think that this was an important moment in that respect. And it's never been more necessary because obviously we're seeing the ways in which what the Trump administration is doing right now, from the prescribed cuts that they're making, advertently to the inadvertent economic catastrophe that they're creating. And so how are you thinking about this in terms of the broader population and the economic consequences that are bearing down right now as the result of this administration?
Their hope is to overwhelm us, is to divide us, is to demoralize us, is to use lies to obscure the truth, to exacerbate some of the lesser angels of our nature by saying, oh, don't worry, we're just attacking criminals and gang members that were disappearing off the street.
But we're already seeing how, okay, they say that we're going to attack gang members, and it can start off that way on Monday, and then Tuesday there's somebody who is an accused gang member, and then Wednesday it's somebody who, they said, okay, well, that person was actually sent as the result of an administrative error, and then it's students whose political ideology doesn't comport with yours. And so we're seeing, by the way, the same slippery slope that Republicans had for so long claimed that Democrats would engage in, but now it's happening in real time.
Yeah, and so that's the point is, are you willing to stop it now, or are you going to wait until it comes to you? This is what I say about the horrors of gun violence, the #1 killer of our children. Are you going to wait to be activated until it's your public school, or is how many school shootings are enough until you say, I'm willing to do more to stop this? But this is something like I've never imagined possible in the United States of America, where we have a president with such sort of unchecked cruelty, is using lies, misinformation, and the ability to overwhelm to challenge so many of the elements of who we are as a democracy. And that's why I have less and less patience, and I'm trying to be somebody who is extending grace to people. But King, in a moment of utter frustration, said, what we have to repent for in our day and age is not just the vitriolic words and violent actions of the bad people, but the appalling silence and inaction of the good people. Whether we are successful or not in defending Medicaid, in defending food programs, in defending Social Security, in defending the constitutional right to due process. The difference is not going to be how much Trump does. The difference is going to be how much we decide to do. Because we have won in the past, but sometimes at great cost, sometimes at great sacrifice. Sometimes during the Red Scare, there were Jewish immigrants here being deported because they were accused communists, and they weren't. During the Red Scare, there were people's careers and livelihoods. Some of the greatest artists were shut down and blacklisted. That went on for way too long until people finally had the courage to stand up. But what is at stake now could cost the lives, and this is not an exaggeration, could literally cost the lives of tens of thousands of our fellow Americans. And I'll give you an example. Again, so much is going on right now that we don't think about it. I think a lot about air pollution because I live in a community, inner city community, that has 4 times the asthma rates of my suburban towns. And I know that a black kid who has an asthma attack is 10 times more likely to die than a white kid that has an asthma attack because of healthcare issues and more. And so when he allowed, right when he got in, the worst polluters to pollute our air more, the particulate matter in the air is going up. Today I wake up and he's pushing for more coal production as he cuts back the incentives for wind and solar. So he's literally making our air more toxic. And there will be people, if you look at the actuarial charts, more people with emphysema and asthma will die as a result. These are the things. I could go through so many examples that this is a life or death issue for your fellow Americans. And this is a call to patriotism, because patriotism is not a flag or a salute or a pledge. Patriotism is love of country. And you cannot love your country unless you love your fellow countrymen and women. And love, at the end of the day, if love is anything, it is saying that I will sacrifice myself for your well-being. That's what love is. When you love your children, when you love your spouse, it's saying that I love you so much that I'm willing to make sacrifices for your well-being. And so how much do you love this country is the test now. This is a test for patriotism. And you are here. And this is what's so offensive to me, that my parents yelled at me to realize when I was in this beautiful home, and they say, don't walk around this house like you hit a triple. You were born on third base. You drink from wells of freedom and liberty that you did not dig with your bare hands. You eat from banquet tables prepared for you by your ancestors. What will you do with these blessings? You cannot become so arrogant that think you deserve what you have. This was paid for by the blood, sweat, and tears of your ancestors. And the question is now, what will you do in your moral moment? And so I have been inadequate in living up to what my parents said. I tried to show that I'm willing to break with that by doing something that literally had my mom who worried. But to me, that is small measure for the person right now who is on her 3rd shift at a diner because she cannot afford to lose money at a time that prices are going up, that her family is more economically insecure, that the rent is going up. She's working a 3rd shift. She's 24 hours on her feet because right now there's not enough of us pushing back on a president. This is our test. This is our moral moment. And I pray to God that history a year from now says that we rose to this moment and stopped him from doing what he's doing.
Perfectly put. Well, you know that Trump is going to point to this and say, patriotism is actually enduring this pain that I myself am voluntarily causing, because that will show that you're willing to sacrifice for what he would say is the greater good in this moment. And yet the irony of all of that is that by virtue of voluntarily crashing the economy, by virtue of voluntarily crashing the stock market, by virtue of voluntarily plummeting everybody's 401ks, now there are people who, for example, were expecting to retire at this moment and can't afford to. There are people who can't afford just their daily expenses that we're seeing right now. And so what would your response to Trump's pushback to that, saying real patriotism is supporting what I'm doing in my efforts here to carry on this trade war?
I mean, that is utter bullshit. And the reason why, it's for a guy who spends the weekend on his golf course and brags to the media about him winning a tournament, while the struggling and the suffering and the fear and the anxiety and the people that write to me about things, they can't sleep thinking about what a 10% or a 5% cut to Medicaid. What he's just saying is endure pain. He's not enduring any pain. Right. This is the kind of gross arrogance of a Marie Antoinette saying, let them eat cake. This is the worst for a billionaire to be lecturing us about suffering economic pain, when there is utterly no wisdom, strategy, economic formula that shows what he's doing is actually going to help this country in the long run. And we know this. Nobody's going to be building a factory right now. No, businesses are telling me, I'm not making any investments in this climate of uncertainty with this president that is so chaotic and so quixotic that you don't know what he's going to do. So screw him for telling people to accept pain. You know what? This pain has been going on a long time. Half of this country has been worse off economically, half of us, while a very narrow margin has been doing better and better and better. The margin is him and his cabinet have been doing better and better, and they can suffer a little bit of increased prices because it's such a small blip on their economic screen. While increased prices for folks in all across America, from rural areas to urban areas who are barely making ends meet, this is a catastrophe for their lives. And screw him for not having the kind of empathy for the struggles of Americans right now because of the pain he is fundamentally, singularly causing to people in America.
Do you have any worry that we're not going to be able to get out of this? Because Trump operates from this Roy Cohn mentality, where any capitulation he views as a sign of weakness. And so even if what he's doing is 100% wrong, and I think we can all see that what he is doing is 100% wrong, he's still not going to relent. So he's going to double, triple, quadruple down because this is about his ego. It's not about the American people. And so even as he's going up against China, and China has no plans to relent against him, they've said that we're going to fight until the end, which is quite literally Xi's words. And so is there any worry that for as bad as it is right now, we're just going to get plunged even deeper into this crisis because now we've got, a pissing contest between two people who are really focused on protecting their egos?
Absolutely. If this was a dictatorship, we would have power to do nothing. We would see yet another leader, like we've seen with totalitarian leaders before, because of their egos, driving a country over the cliff. But Congress has the power. It's spelled out in the Constitution of the United States. We could pass legislation. We got a piece of legislation out of the Senate that said no tariffs against Canada. Yeah. And it shows we have the power. And so the question is not what he's going to do. It's how are we going to turn a few senators here, 4 or 3 in the House. It's really not that many. And we've done it before. These are bigger stakes affecting millions and millions more. But the ACA in 2017, the people of this country demanding change, changed Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and John McCain, and got them to vote differently and save for about 20 million Americans their access to health care. Well, this is hundreds of millions of Americans now that are going to suffer from this economy. This is tens of millions, 80, 90 millions of Americans that are facing healthcare crisis. These are millions of Americans facing a retirement crisis. And so the fundamental crossroads we're at right now is not what he's going to do. We know who he is. He has shown us who we are. Even the people that voted for him now, from his millionaire supporters you're hearing breaking with him, from conservative think tanks now breaking with him, he has shown us who he is. We now, this question is are we going to show who we are? Are we a nation that is going to tolerate this, or a nation that's going to stand up? And as the great Frederick Douglass said, the limits of tyrants are prescribed by the people that they seek to oppress. What is our endurance? By the endurance of those they choose to oppress. How much will we endure before we say enough is enough? I am going to give more. I'm going to march more. I'm going to speak out more. I'm going to stand up more. That's the test that we're in right now. It's a moral moment. How will you respond? I know there should keep pressure on your Democratic Congress people and senators to do more. Keep pressure on people that are in this edifice, the sacred civic space that is the Capitol. But change has never come from Washington. It's always come to Washington by people that demand it. Again, Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand.
We all know that if this was happening under a Democratic president, that your Republican colleagues would be apoplectic about all of this. And yet, because it's the God King, because it's Daddy Trump, they're not going to do anything to push back against this. But do you think that there is some appetite among your colleagues, knowing that, okay, the pushing back against Trump for them when he is at his peak popularity feels existential because he can, for example, promote a primary challenge against them to the right, knowing full well that Elon Musk can fund it. But now there's another existential risk for them in the sense that now their own constituents are feeling the pain of what's happening. And so it's not just, okay, my only worry is Donald Trump in some primary challenge. Now, if I want to stay in office, I'm still accountable to, if you're in the House, 700,000 people, or if you're in the Senate, as many as 40 million people. And so do you think that we're going to see some sea changes? Are there any rumblings from your Republican colleagues beyond just the 7 who signed on to that bill regarding Canada, but just more broadly to rein in what, again, if this was happening under a Democratic president, they would be losing their minds over, and B, still doesn't even comport with like conservative ideology because there's nothing economic or fiscally responsible about this.
No. And I just want to take one step back and say we can't paint with a broad brush. We know the names of Republicans that have spoken out already. I always say there's a reason why the book Profiles in Courage is such a thin volume. But we should point it out. Yeah. From Liz Cheney to Jeff Flake, there are examples of people who were willing to sacrifice their offices and their positions to do the right thing in a moment of moral urgency. Yeah. And so your question is really pointed. I hear in private conversation the disgruntled feelings of some of my Republican colleagues, but that's not enough. When are they going to step up and be willing to say, I may face a primary challenge. Elon Musk may put $100 million against me, but I'm going to do the right thing by my people. And I am confident, and we just talked about that in a meeting with Hakeem Jeffries and others where House leadership and Senate leadership came together. We had an explicit conversation that there are a dozen or more House members that are in purple districts where overwhelmingly, whether they identify in that district as a Republican or a Democrat, they are against what Donald Trump is doing. And we've got to put a special pressure there so that those House Republicans realize that I fear my own community, my own constituents, more than I fear Elon Musk and Donald Trump. And that's the pressure that's ultimately going to help us to win. I saw it in New Jersey in District 11. There was a long-time congressperson. I know him. He has decency and a famous family in our state, but he was siding with Trump over the interests of his community. And in this case, it was hospitals, which will close in rural areas, will suffer in urban areas if they cut the Medicaid. And he stood with Trump, and his constituents said enough is enough and voted him out and voted in somebody else. That's the math that I think people are doing. Right. It's not a moral math. It's often a math of like, who am I more afraid of? But whatever it takes right now, we got to put that pressure on.
Well, look, I think in terms of being able to put that pressure on, and in terms of people recognizing their agency, what you did on the Senate floor gave people kind of the kick in the ass they need to recognize that we have it. And I think in no small part, you standing up there for 25 hours and you putting your body on the line really did serve as an impetus for just a few days later, a lot of people to take to the streets and recognize that we again have agency in what we're doing here. So I know that I speak on behalf of a lot of people in thanking you for doing that. And I know that the question you've obviously been asked more than any other question. I don't want to devalue this interview by asking about how you were able to go 25 hours without using the restroom or anything. But how did you go 25 hours without using the restroom?
I did something. The fasting, intermittent fasting, is something I do all the time. And so I stopped eating days before. But the probably dumb thing that I don't recommend, and I've been yelled at by my doctors, was I just dehydrated myself for more than 24 hours before. Yeah. And I don't recommend that, but it worked. It worked a little too well, even after the 25 hours. The first thing I did was not run to the bathroom, was get a banana, but I had to start ingesting a lot of watermelon fruit and stuff to go to the bathroom. Why are you this concerned about my my biology?
Look, I come from a long line of Jewish women. I have to make sure you're okay. As you know, Jersey is filled with a lot of very concerned Jewish mothers, making sure that if people are eating. So
my cousin who Pam Herbert, who literally, Chris Murphy was my godsend who stayed with me the 25 hours on the floor. But in the gallery, my cousin, who's an emergency room doctor, sat there in the gallery for me to write in my sightline the entire time. And she meticulously noticed when I was in trouble a few times. Like in the first 3 hours, my feet got very numb. That's why I started shifting back and forth. Yeah. So much so that one of my colleagues took a illegal picture, so I'm not going to call him out, and I can't publish the picture. I'll show it to you of just how much the carpet was torn up because I was trying to get the blood to flow back to my feet. But she thankfully did not tell me the dangers. This is why do not dehydrate yourself for over an hour, especially she's just said all the things that could have happened in your body during that stress. So, but thank God I did not have to go to the bathroom, and thank God and you know this, and people demonstrate this every day, especially people who have the big whys, the people that stand in hospitals and do 24-hour shifts, the people that protect our streets that often do 24-hour shifts. If you have a big enough why, you can do anything, and the body has limits, but this American spirit, the human spirit, has no limits. And those last 5 hours, I was being carried by ancestors and the energy. My staff kept giving me notes about how many people were cheering me on to make it the last 5 hours.
Well, again, it matters, I think, more than I can even say right now. So I appreciate you putting your body on the line. I appreciate you figuring out a way to break through, and all the work that you're doing.
I appreciate you. I'm happy that we have actually an in real life friendship now, but you've been one of those people that sources me and inspires me and informs me even. You have been so present. I know you live on the West Coast, but you actually have a lot of people probably envious of your frequent flyer miles. You've been present here in the Capitol, asking tough questions, but more importantly, I think informing people at a time. There's a tradition here in DC that my parents relied on. Personalities like you, back then it was black radio, and those folks sustained people during the toughest times in African American history, informed people and entertained people too. They were funny, and the music of my parents' generation, they told me how powerful the arts were, and then people in the media were. And I think you're carrying on the best of those traditions. So thank you for doing what you do.
I appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, man.